Good day to you all. This video is created according to the e-learning program of Jaffna College, supported by Capital TV. First of all, I want to introduce myself. I am Abhishek and the science student of Jaffna College. Basically, I am a student, not a teacher, so ensure me as your friend and keep an eye on my presentation in the subject Appreciation of English Literary Text, GCE Ordinary Level. I took the poem War is Kind as the topic of my presentation, so let's move. Here we are. First, we are going to see the contents of the presentation. The first, introduction part. Introduction including a brief description about the poet, the background of the poem, the title, and the fabrication of the narrator. Next one, we are going to see the analysis part of each stanzas, including all the poetic techniques. After that, a glimpse about the themes of the poem. At last, the critical essay questions. Then, here we are. This is a picture of Stephen Crane. You can see his lifespan is between 1871 to 1900. You may ask, what is the reason to know about the poet, or is it necessary to know about the poet? As a student, we want to analyze the root or the cause or the reason which makes the poet to write a poem about war. As the title suggests, the writer is going to describe about war, because the title is War is Kind. So, what makes the writer to write a poem about war? For an example, if we take a nature lover, he goes to the seashore in order to observe the sunset. His admiration about the sunset can be written as a poem. He expresses his feelings about the admiration of sunset. Then that is a poetry, that is called poetry. For another instance, if a person who fell in love, he may write his poems for his beloved one. Here, the true love is his theme, and that makes him to write poems. Likewise, here we are going to find out what is the reason for Stephen Crane as an American poet. What is the reason he wants to write the poem about war? So actually, Stephen Crane was considered as a literary critic in the American civilization as a new generation poet. Also, he won an international acclaim in 1895 for his short novel, The Red Badge of Courage, about a civil war. It is quite significant that this poem War is Kind was published in 1899, and before that year, in 1895, he already wrote a short novel about civil war. It is quite interesting that because even he didn't get an experience by involving in a war, he wrote a short novel about war. So, as a continuity of this short novel, this War is Kind also may be formed. Oh, another reason, here we can see how later in 1896, he was offered as a war correspondent to Cuba. So, his experience during that job may be a reason for him to write a poem about war. So, at last, we are going to see his common themes about involved fear, spiritual crisis, social isolation, along the title War. So, hope you understand about the poet and why he wrote the poem War is Kind. We are moving. Here we are, American Civil War. You may ask, am I teaching literature or history? As a matter of fact, literature is a common subject interrelated to other subjects. It is a common to all. In order to make a firm foundation for my presentation, I have selected American Civil War as a fact. American Civil War took place in 1861 to 1865. Here you can see the picture of Abraham Lincoln, who was the 16th president of USA, United States of America. Why I am telling about him, and what is the reason, you may ask? Because why Abraham Lincoln was famous? He is famous for abolishing the slavery, just of course. During this era, the United States was divided into two types as northern state and southern state. The northern state is full of industrialization. It's based on industrialization, and the labor forces get from the laborers. And the government government implements some rules and regulations for the laborers in order to protect their rights. And there are high authorities to protect the laborers' salary and laborers' rights. On the other hand, the southern state The southern state is based on agriculture and the labor force is get from the slaves. Here you can see how a white man is treating a labor. Actually, these slaves are treating a slave. Actually, these slaves are considered as a normal things in the marketplace by selling and buying them. So, this clash between the abolishing slavery causes the American Civil War, and these two involved in fight. So, this may be also a reason for the writer to write a poem about war. So, next we are moving. Here you can see a picture which describes the American Civil War. The two colors resembles the northern state and southern state. So, next, the title of the poem. What is the title of the poem? The title of the poem is War is Kind. Even a baby can say war is not kind, but a recognized poet, but a literary critic poet, an American poet says that war is kind. Why? Because for instance, if we give this title to an unknown person without giving the whole poem, if we give only this title, war is kind, what are the suggestions that evoke in his mind? He may tell that the poet is going to prove that war is kind. These are the suggestions that may occur in his mind. Oh, next one, he or she may tell that the poet is going to negate the glorification of the war using his tactics. Actually, the second point, by the way, the second point is going to be described. So, these are the suggestions that may occur. So, that's why the poet utilizes the heading, War is Kind. Because in order to create a curiosity and anxiety in the reader's mind to read the whole poem without even missing a single word. So, here we can see the tone and the mode. We confused about the tone and the mode of the tone refers to the narrator and the mode refers to the readers. Here, the bitter and ironic tone plays a prominent play in this poem. Then, as I already mentioned, here you can see the interface of that short novel, The Red Badge of Courage. Here, in this poem also, the writer portrays some eventual facts related to this novel. So, hope you understand. We are moving to the next slide. Here we are. Next step to the title, we are going to analyze what is war. War is an intense armed conflict between two governments, or two social groups, or two political groups, or between two gangs in order to get a power or authority even for an own country. For an example, if we take the Sri Lankan Civil War, which took place until 2009, nowadays also, we can see some repercussions. Repercussions means the ill effects and scars of it. Because, especially in the northern part, in eastern part of the Sri Lanka. So, why I am telling about the Sri Lankan Civil War? Because here also the poet tells how this war and its aspects affects society, and we are going to see how the poet portrays his main theme. So, here you can see a quotation, war does not determine who is right, only who is left. Means, here we can use these quotations in our introduction part in order to attract the examiner. So, hope you understand. The next slide. The fabrication of the narrator. There are two main ways how the narrator fabricates his theme. First one is using three personalities, grieving kid, mourning maiden, and a sorrowing mother. Actually, this poem consists of 5 stanzas, including 26 lines, and out of the 5 stanzas, the 3 stanzas, the poet is describing about the sufferings of 3 personalities named as mourning maiden, grieving kid, and a sorrowing mother. The second technique of the poet to negate the war's glorification is telling about the intimate surrounding of the war zone. Here we can see in the second stanza and the fourth stanza, the poet is trying to make an image in the reader's mind by telling some imageries. Actually, I took some of the special words from each stanza as regiment and a blazing flag. Regiment means a couple of soldiers, and a blazing flag means actually we are going to study what the flag is symbolizes. So here you can see the flag of USA, including a picture of eagle in it. So we are going to find out why the poet is mentioning the eagle and the flag in his poem. So we have finished the introduction part. Next one is the stanza-wise analysis. The first stanza: do not weep, maiden, for war is kind, because your lover threw wild hands towards the sky, and the affrighted steed ran on alone. Do not weep, war is kind. I am repeating those lines. Do not weep, maiden, for war is kind, because your lover threw wild hands towards the sky, and the affrighted steed ran on alone. Do not weep, war is kind. As a matter of fact, as I already mentioned, here the poet is trying to address a mourning maiden who loses her lover in the war because of the ferocity of the war. So in order to identify the complicated phrases, here I think affrighted steed means, affrighted means nervous and steed means horse. So we are going to find out what makes the horse to be nervous. Here the wild hands. What is the purpose of using the phrase wild hands? Wild hands refers to the bravery or the strength of the fighter, the lover. Even though he is brave enough and strong enough to fight against his enemies, he becomes as a victim of the war. This is the reality of the war. That's why the poet utilized some phrases such as towards the sky, affrighted steed, in order to show the reality of war. So here we are. Here you can see a picture of an affrighted steed. As I already mentioned, steed means horse. So what is refrain? Refrain means repeating of lines. Here we can see, do not weep, maiden, for war is kind. At last also, do not weep, war is kind. These two lines are repeated. What is the reason for this? Because the writer wants to emphasize the fact. He wants to emphasize the fact and insist his theme into the reader's mind by negating the glorification of the war. Then the antithesis made by him, along with it sarcasm and refrains. Using in the first stanza, the poet makes an antithesis about war by telling the authentic fact about the war's ferocious deeds and its aspects and negating its glorification. Hope you understand. We are moving to the second stanza analysis. Hoarse booming drums of the regiment, little souls who thirst for fight, these men were born to drill and die. The unexplained glory flies above them. Great is the battle god, great and his kingdom, a field where 1,000 corpses lie. I am repeating those lines. Hoarse booming drums of the regiment, little souls who thirst for fight, these men were born to drill and die. The unexplained glory flies above them. Great is the battle god, great and his kingdom. So, here, as I already mentioned, in the second stanza, the writer wants to portray the image of a battlefield. That's why, in order to show the complicated phrases, here we can see hoarse booming drums of the regiment. Why the poet using the phrases like this? Because he wants to make an auditory imagery in order to make the sense of auditories in the reader's mind, to make a vivid picture about the battlefield. Then the little souls. Little souls means the young men. Young men are usually energetic and dynamic. They want to involve themselves in the adventurous. So that's why the warmongers select and hypnotize them in order to attract them towards the war. Actually, young men are the backbone of a society, and they want to show some romantic heroism. As a teenage boy, I am assured that, including my friend, even myself also, involved in some romantic heroism in front of others in order to attract them. Likewise, here also, the young men wants to involve themselves in romantic heroism. That's why they are attracted towards the war. Then, these men were born to drill and die. The phrase drill and die coincides with the phrase do or die, which is taken from the poem The Charge of the Light Brigade, written by Alfred Lord Tennyson. I think you get the hint that Alfred Lord Tennyson, you have already studied in the grade 10 syllabus. The Eagle is also written by Alfred Lord Tennyson. This is another poem named as the charge of the light brigade, which means which also consists the phrase do or die, which coincides with the phrase drill and die. Then the unexplained glory flies above them. The unexplained glory resembles the illusion made by the warmongers for this young man. Then great is the battle god, great and his kingdom. Here you can see the picture of a battle god. Battle god, according to the Roman mythology, battle god refers to the planet Mars, and the poet is negating the battle god's glorification also, because he uses some sarcastic adjectives in front of great is the battle god, great and his kingdom, field where 1,000 corpses lies. Also, he addressing the kingdom of the battlefield as a field where 1,000 corpses lie. Corpses means the dead bodies. Actually, this young men become as the main meal of the hunger of this battle god. So, in the second stanza, the poet not only negates the glorification of the war, but also negates, makes an antithesis about the battle god Mars. Moving to the next slide, third stanza analysis. Do not weep, babe, for war is kind, because your father tumbled in the yellow trenches, raged at his breast, gulped and died. Do not weep, war is kind. Here we can see how the poet is calling a baby. Actually, babe means a baby. In order to see the complicated phrases, tumbled means fell in, and the yellow trenches. Trenches means a place where the soldiers or the fighters seeks for protection in order to protect themselves from, in order to safeguard themselves from the enemies. It's quite ironic because even the father tries to protect himself, he becomes as a target of the enemies. That's the irony made by the poet in this poem. Then, why the poet uses the word yellow in order to add, as an adjective of trenches? Because do you know the word jaundice? Jaundice is a disease. In Sinhala they call it as Sangamala. In Tamil we call it as Manjal Kamal. This disease, due to the breakdown of red blood cells in our blood system, blood circulatory system, our whole complexion, even our eye, changes to a pale yellow color. How nowadays how COVID-19 disease is considered as a deadly disease, in that day, before inventing the vaccination for it, it was considered, the disease jaundice was considered as a deadly disease. That's why all the poets, not only the Stephen Crane, but all the poets and narrators utilize this word, utilize the color yellow in order to show the illness or the death. Here, the father falls in the yellow trenches and he becomes as a victim of the enemies. That's why the poet utilized the yellow. Here we can see how not only the writers and the poets not only portraying their theme, but also portraying the occurrence and the happenings of the world. That's the tactics of the poets and narrators. So we are moving to the main point. Raged at his breast, gulped and died. Do not weep, war is kind. So here, raged, gulped, died. Here the tactile imagery is used in order to show the gruesome death of the father. So, in this third stanza, first of all, the poet is describing about a baby and who loses her father in the war, and his gruesome how the father is, even he is in a safest, he is in a safe place, how he become as a target of the enemies is described in the third stanza. Moving the fourth stanza analysis. Swift blazing flag of the regiment, eagle with crest of red and gold, these men were born to drill and die, point for them the virtue of slaughter, make plain to them the excellence of killing, and a field where 1,000 corpses lie. As I already mentioned, here you can see the word flag. Why the poet uses the word flag? Because Flag resembles the country. Country belongs to the people. So the flag symbolizes the society or the people in it. As a matter of fact, first of all, the society gives the approval or gives the green signal to the war leaders or the warmongers to conduct the war, because they gain some benefits through that. Even they put forward their family members as soldiers in the war. But at last, it's quite ironic how they are the victims of the war, not the war leaders or the warmongers. So that's why the poet uses the word flag. An eagle with crusted of red and gold. As I already mentioned, eagle resembles the USA, because the writer may write about the American Civil War and its causes. So then, point for them the virtue of slaughter, make plain for them the excellence of killing. These are the immoral motives of the warmongers in order to hypnotize these young men. So, virtue of slaughter. Virtue refers to some moral things and slaughter refers to some killing. So why the poet tries to connect these two different phrases? In order to show the contradiction or the paradox. In order to show how the warmongers make an illusion that these are correct. They want to make an illusion in front of these by using these emotive morals. Then in this fourth stanza, the poet is talking about the setting of the war. Here we are, the fifth stanza analysis. Mother whose heart hung humble as a button, the bright splendid shroud of your son, do not be war is kind. Here, as I already mentioned, in the fifth stanza, at least it's the last stanza, the poet is addressing a mother whose son becomes as a victim in the war's ferocity. Here, the poet utilizes the simile technique. Simile means what? Using the words such as like and as. Here we can see how the poet whose heart hung humble as a button. So, here the poet tries to compare the heart of this mother for the button, which is in the splendid shroud. What is shroud? A clothing that is used to cover the dead bodies. And the bright, why the poet utilizes this adjective bright? In order to show the illusion made by the warmongers. They are giving the respect, but the main reason is in order to manage those problems and in order to find the war's glorification in a top level. So that's why the poet points out the illusions made by the warmongers through the adjective bright. Then the button. The button oscillates from this here and there, likewise without any support. Likewise, the mother's future. The mother's future is dependent on her son, and it's ironic that it's pathetic because the son is already dead. So the future of her mother or her heart or her state without any support is compared to this button. So here we can see soul's consolation without any support. So in this fifth stanza, the poet is addressing a mother and comparing her state as a button without any support, and also with the illusions made by the warmongers. Hope you understand. We have finished the analysis part, then the literary devices. First of all, irony. What is irony? Irony can be divided as verbal irony, situational irony, dramatic irony. It is quite interesting because the poet utilizes all the ironies in his poem. First one, the verbal irony. The actual meaning of the phrase is not given. It's an indirect meaning. We can take the title, war is kind. Even a baby can say war is not kind, but the recognized poet is saying war is kind. So that is a verbal irony. Then the situational irony. Then the outcomes of the situations cannot be expected, or in a tragic manner. That's called the situational irony. Great is the battle god, great and his kingdom, because people may tell that God is here and he can protect or safeguard the humankind from the evil forces. But here the poet is negating the battle god's glorification, because the young man becomes as the main meal for his hunger. So here the situational irony. Then the dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is of course because of the audience has more information when comparing to the characters. The audience or the readers or the viewers can get more information when comparing to the characters through the narrator. Thirst for fight. These young men are going to the war in order to fight and show their romantic heroism, but there are only two things take place there. One is killing, the another one is surviving. They won't kill another in order to survive, or they won't leave that particular war zone. So that's the dramatic irony. The readers get to know that these young men are going to become a victim of the war, but this young man doesn't know. That is dramatic irony. Then the metaphors or metonymy, as I already mentioned, the little souls refers to the young man who is the backbone of the society. Then here we are, simile, as I is also discussed in the previous slides, as hard hung, humble as a button, the as and but like are the words that are used in simile. Then the contradiction, virtue of slaughter, excellence of healing, these are the contradiction or a paradox. Then symbols, swift blazing flag of the regiment, the flag refers to the society. Then refrain and chorus, as I already mentioned, these are used to emphasize the facts or the themes or the concepts of the poet. War is kind, do not weep. We can see these lines are repeated again and again in the whole throughout the poem. Then the personification. Why this is personification, you may ask? Because kindness is a quality attributed to the humankind, but the poet utilizes it to address the war. War is kind. And imagery, these imageries are especially used in the second and fourth stanzas mainly, and we can divide these in three types as visual, auditory and tactile. Along with it, the color imagery also included. The visual imagery in order to make a visual sense, the auditory imagery is in order to make an auditory sense, then the tactile imagery tumbled in the jello trenches to make the sensation, to make how the characters feels in the point of view of the readers. Then the sound devices, alliteration, consonants, assonance and onomatopoeia. Alliterations, the initial sound of the word starts with a consonant sound, such as drill and die. The dr sound is repeated. Then the consonant sound, the vowel sound, the consonant sounds are repeated because to allow through wild hands to right hands towards the sky. The r sound is repeated here. Then the assonance, the vowel sounds are repeated. Point for them the virtue of slaughter, or the o sound is repeated. Then the onomatopoeia makes the sensations in the reader's mind, that is booming drums. We can get a sense about this one. Then here we can see a quotation, if we don't end the war, war will end us. As I already mentioned, we can use these quotations in our introduction part to attract the examiners. Themes. Moving to the third part, themes. Themes here mainly the four themes: antithesis of war's glorification, sufferings of the war's victims, self-centered war motives, patriotism of the young man. First of all, the antithesis of war glorification, as I, by the way, I am telling these facts in, along with the first stanza. The futility. What is meant by futility? The uselessness of the war. As a matter of fact, in the whole poem, the poet utilized some ironies, some sarcastic manner. In a sarcastic manner, the poet is trying to portray the antithesis of war. We can call it as a negation of the war. Then the inherent cruelty. How the soldiers become as a victim in front of the in the war zone. Then how the father dies, how the son dies without leaving her mother without any soul's consolation. Then the immoral motives, virtue of slaughter. Sufferings of the war's victims. The three main personalities, grieving kid, a mourning maiden, a sorrowing mother. These three personalities, which resembles the civilizations, are portrayed as the suffering of the war's victims. Here we can see deprived personalities. In order to address them, the adjective deprived. Then the consequences of the war, how the ill effects of war affects these people. Then here we can see another quotation. All war is a symptom of man's failure as a thinking animal. Actually, man is a thinking animal. He wants to become as a role model in front of the other animal, but as a matter of fact, he is the actual or the real reason for many problems, not only the war, but also some other problems such as global warming or environmental pollution. So you can quote not only getting these for your education purpose, you want to think as a logic one. Then the self-centered war motives. Actually, the soldiers are out of control and controlled by the warmongers by their illusions. Illusions, the virtue of slaughter and excellence of killings are the immoral motives or the immoral slogans of the war. As I already mentioned, the virtues refers to the moral and slaughter refers to the killing. The poet tries to connect this in order to show how the self-centered motives, in order to satisfy only for the selfish of the warmongers, they are using these people as a pawns, like how the chess player moves his pawns in order to attack his enemy. Likewise, these warmongers or the war leaders utilize these young people in order to attack their enemies. They do not, these young men do not involve in romantic heroism, but they are out of control. They are controlled by the warmongers. Then the patriotism of the young man. As I already mentioned, the romantic heroism, the young man wants to involve in romantic heroism, and the warmongers or the war leaders utilize this romantic heroism, patriotism, by tempting them and hypnotizing them by the immoral war slogans. They utilize them as their puppet, like a doll in their hand. They are utilizing them in order to satisfy their needs. So the last one, the critical questions. In the poem War is Kind, Stephen Crane vividly describes how war always affects man's humanity and civilization. How does the poet convey it? So first of all, we want to know about these keywords. Affects the man's humanity and civilization. Humanity, in order to talk about humanity, as you already as a matter of fact, you may know your essay questions consist of 7 marks for the content and 4 marks for organization and 4 marks for language, altogether 15 marks. So we want to make a good organization along with the language and the content. Affects man's humanity and civilization. We can talk about humanity, how the brutality or the cruelty forced by the war for these 3 personalities and their relatives, the father, the lover and the son. Then the next question, War is Not Kind. Discuss how this idea is presented. Stephen Crane's War is Kind. War is not kind. As I already mentioned, even a baby can say war is not kind. So we want to talk about the antithesis or the negation of the writer about war and its aspects and its glorification. Then Stephen Crane portrays the brutality caused by war. Comment on this statement. The brutality. So we can say the fate of these 3 people, such as lover, father and the son. Then the suffering of the victims, the 3 personalities such as maiden, babe and the mother. Along with that, we can conclude with the war's brutality. Then hope to understand. This is known as a word cloud. In order to make our essay question in a neatly manner, these words can be used here. So some rich vocabularies can be used. So it may be beneficial to do. So at last, thank you for watching this video. See you soon with another presentation. Thank you.